say fuck a lot. But I accept myself for the way I am. I accept you too. Viewer discretion advised. Thanks goes out to Liz for putting all this together and connecting these dots. Let's check it out. Thursday, September 19th, 2013. Today's blind items. The cruelest show ever. Kind of old Hollywood. An actress is selling her story. Not her life so much, although it will be included, but her life on one particular television show and the aftermath it brought. The show was a huge hit when it was on the air. It was in color, but barely. It has also been called Cursed. The actress, who never really worked again after it aired, is selling publishers on more than just the curse. She is selling them on what happened behind the scenes on the show, where she was basically forced to have sex with the lead actors and producers, and that the young cast on the show had no choice either, and that both the boys and girls on the cast were molested as they got older, forced to have sex. She also claims that most well-known actor on the show was probably almost A-list at the time, was not only having sex with his TV daughter, but also his real-life daughter, too. The actress says that everyone was complicit, and that studio heads would come over to the soundstage during the day and have their pick of the extras on the set that day. Our actress also has interviews with other female TV actresses of the day who say their shows were very much the same, and that it was no wonder so many of the women hid behind the veil of drugs and booze as they got older, and so many died tragic deaths. And the clues. Hit TV show, quote, barely in color. An actress selling the story in 2013 of the Cursed show. A-list actor who has at least one daughter. Some of the cast was younger. So many turned to drugs and booze and had tragic ends. Before I start looking at the clues, we should watch this.
Mary Anissa Jones was born on March 11th, 1958. in the college town of West Lafayette, Indiana. Her parents, John and Paula Jones, married the year before while they were both attending graduate school at Purdue University. In 1959, after the birth of their second child, Paul, the couple moved the family to Los Angeles and they bought a house on the beach. John went to work for the Hughes Aircraft Company. Paula stayed home to take care of the kids. She was particularly fond of her outgoing daughter. Anissa, as her family called her, started weekly dance lessons at the age of 4. Later that year, John moved into his own apartment. Months later, in April of 1965, he filed for a divorce. Paula was awarded custody of the children and the beachfront property. Financially unable to maintain her homemaker status, she occasionally worked as a real estate agent and high school substitute teacher. Paula Jones hoped her daughter's charm and talent could translate into financial security for the broken family. She aggressively pursued a show business career for Anissa. The persistence paid off in the spring of 1966, when 8-year-old Anissa tried out for her first television role in a newly developed series titled Family Affair. Anissa was the overwhelming choice for the role of Buffy, the youngest of 3 children who move in with their bachelor uncle after their parents die in a car crash. Veteran actor Brian Keith was cast as the freewheeling Uncle Bill, with Sebastian Cabot as his jovial butler, Mr. French. Kathy Garver was given the part of the teenage sister Sissy, and Johnny Whitaker played Brother Jody, who was several years older than Buffy in the original storyline. The producers made a quick change, however, after taking one look at Buffy and Jody together.
When Anissa Jones and I got in front of the camera, magic was made. And Hollywood decided, this is it. We're going to change it from a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old to 6-year-old twins. And we became the twins.
The kids were the key, along with Brian. And that's, we thought, it would just be a little bit different from that, but they went with the money, and the money was obviously the kids.
By the middle of the first season, Family Affair became one of the most popular series on television. By 1967, 9-year-old Anissa Jones had one of the most demanding schedules in Hollywood. She spent weekdays on the set of Family Affair and weekends on the road doing publicity for both the show and her growing line of merchandise. It was an enormous workload for a child. The show's production supervisor, John Stevens, worried about the consequences.
She was happy with the role at first, and it was all very glamorous, but then it wore down very quickly. The schedule was just impossible for her.
Stevens expressed his concerns to Anissa's mother, Paula.
The only thing I would ever really say that I would find fault with Paula is that we all said, please, since you have a direct relationship with Don Feddersen, please speak to Don Feddersen and tell him that Anissa needs some time off. She's got to lead a little bit of a normal life. That was never done.
Paula did not take the advice to heart. Anissa was kept busier than ever. The business-like relationship that developed between mother and daughter was noticed by co-stars Johnny Whitaker and Kathy Garver.
She obeyed Paula. She did what she was told. Probably from an authoritarian type of relationship. Paula was very authoritarian.
Whenever Paula spoke, Anissa listened, and that she was very obedient, and she did what, Mommy said.
Anissa was making lots of money for both the show and her family. No one in power was willing to alter her workload. The sitcom's success spawned lucrative side businesses, including a line of clothes, books, and toys. At the center of the media and marketing frenzy was the show's biggest star, a little girl named Anissa Jones, a tiny 9-year-old, for whom success meant all work and no play.
She really never left the studio almost 52 weeks out of the year, which is just an awful lot to ask of a little child.
Is everybody's favorite from Family Affair, Miss Anissa Jones.
The popularity of Family Affair turned Anissa into a highly sought-after television personality. In 1967, at the age of 9, she became one of the youngest presenters at the Emmy Awards.
Isn't she cute?
Anissa also ventured into the talk show world, serving as co-hostess on The Mike Douglas Show.
I understand that Sebastian teased you when you were here last about being on the show and everything. Did he say anything about that?
Well, no, but he's on the show. He was on the show, wasn't he?
Yes, he did a whole week with me.
So he always tells me, says, well, I was on the show, and, you really are going on the show? Whoa.
Is that the way he talks like that?
Well, he has...
Deep voice, yes, he did.
Well, he's a man.
Oh, yes. If he had a higher voice, he'd be a girl, wouldn't he? Huh?
No, he would be a man with a high voice.
For Anissa, all this success meant more demands on her time.
The publicity director, Les Coffin, would come onto our set at 4:30 and asking me when the kids will be finished. And I said, what do you mean? Well, don't you know she's going to St. Louis along with Johnny to open a shoe store? I said, what? Yes, and then she's going to New York to open a department store. Then she's going to stop down in San Diego. I said, all of that in one weekend? And that was it.
The pace never slowed for Anissa, even after she broke her leg in a playground accident in April of 1969. The Family Affair writers simply incorporated the injury into a story. Anissa longed for a conventional life. She wanted to attend public school so she could spend more time with friends, but regular school conflicted with her bustling career. Anissa also suffered because of a complicated relationship with her parents. She never saw and rarely spoke of her father John in the years after her parents' divorce in 1965. Paula's behavior also drove a wedge between her and Anissa. Despite mounting frustrations in her personal and professional life, Anissa abided by her mother's orders. Those around Anissa wondered for how much longer. By the 5th season in 1970, Family Affair slipped out of the top 10. Television viewing taste shifted to more adult-themed comedies such as All in the Family and The Flip Wilson Show. CBS president Fred Silverman wanted to phase out traditional programming, and Family Affair was one of the first casualties. In the summer of 1971, after 138 episodes, the show was unceremoniously canceled. While most of the cast and crew of Family Affair scrambled to find other work, 13-year-old Anissa was thrilled to finally get a break. Paula Jones took Anissa to several auditions, including one for the role of Reagan, a girl possessed by the devil in The Exorcist. Anissa was thrilled when she didn't get the part. She happily stepped out of the spotlight and into civilian life, enrolling in junior high school in the fall of 1972. Anissa's greatest challenges, however, were not in public, but inside her own home. The up-and-down relationship with her mother grew rockier as an increasingly eccentric Paula spent less and less time attending to her 13-year-old daughter. Friend Lisa Valdez often couldn't believe what she witnessed when she visited Anissa.
The mom would answer the door with no clothes on, or hiding behind a newspaper, or she'd be in her bed yelling, saying, "Anissa, answer the door." And you didn't really see her much. She wasn't a motherly type.
Searching for parental stability, Anissa turned to her father. John Jones had been absent for years, but in the early 1970s, he moved within a few blocks of his daughter's home. John relished the chance to get reacquainted with Anissa and his son Paul, but John and his mother Helen were startled at the apparent neglect.
She didn't have a stitch of clothes to wear when she came to Johnny. The first thing they had to do was go and buy her a dress.
In December of 1972, John fought to gain custody of 14-year-old Anissa and 13-year-old Paul. The bitter battle that ensued included John's shocking claim that Paul had physically and verbally abused Anissa and Paul.
Paul had a mean disposition. How do you know what she'd do to him or do to her? She could come and take her away. So he had to get custody of her so nobody could take her away.
After ordering psychiatric exams of both parents, a judge awarded custody of the Jones kids to their 44-year-old father, John, in April of 1973. Anissa and her brother Paul found serenity inside their father's tiny beach apartment. Anissa's desire for a stable home life took a tragic turn in early 1974 when her father suddenly fell ill. Not long after entering the hospital, John Paul Jones died of heart disease on March 7, 1974. He was 44. A week later, Anissa marked her 16th birthday by scattering her father's ashes over the ocean. Following their father's unexpected death, Paul returned to live with his mother, while Anissa moved in with Elaine. Paula was incensed that her daughter would not come home, so she called the police and reported Anissa as a runaway. 16-year-old Anissa was arrested and taken to juvenile hall, where she was locked up for several months.
It was kind of sad. And I brought her books that she could read, didn't know what to take her. And she told me the horrible things that happened at juvenile hall.
When she was released from juvenile hall in the summer of 1974, Anissa went to stay with her grandmother in Orange County, California, south of Los Angeles. But Anissa missed her friends and the beach, and that fall she reluctantly moved back in with her mother. The family reunion did not go well. Anissa responded by adopting a rebellious lifestyle. As a young star, Anissa made thousands of dollars a week on Family Affair. By the time she was 16, however, most of that money had been spent, and Anissa rarely had $1 in her pocket. To make ends meet, the former child icon took a job at a local donut shop. It was during this period in 1975 that Anissa became a fixture on the local Southern California party scene. Alan Coven was a regular cohort.
I knew all kinds of people, but the people I hung around with were into drugs and alcohol, and so was I. So was Anissa.
Anissa did more than drink beer and smoke marijuana. She often got high on such potent drugs as Quaaludes, angel dust, cocaine, and downers. Anissa's schoolwork suffered. By her senior year of high school in 1975, she was more than a year behind in credits and transferred to a school for troubled students. She never spoke about college or future plans, but one thing Anissa did look forward to was her 18th birthday. On that day, she would receive a $70,000 trust fund from her Family Affair earnings. Anissa marked the occasion with a big party at her mother's house, and shortly thereafter, she bought a car and moved into an apartment with her brother Paul.
She got that money, man. They were out. And that's where the trouble really started.
Hit TV show Barely in Color. The series was one of the first half-hour sitcoms to be shot in color for its entire length. Actress was selling the story in 2013 and said it was cursed. Kathy Garver, who played Sissy in Family Affair, put out a book in 2015 called Surviving Sissy, My Family Affair of Life in Hollywood. Family Affairs' Kathy Garver opens up about the cast curse, and there's a lot of other articles about the show being cursed. A-list actor has at least one daughter. Brian Keith, at the time, supposedly was an A-list, and he committed suicide, because evidently his daughter, Daisy, committed suicide. Some of the cast were younger. Well, that's a given. And they were talking about so many turning to drugs and booze and having tragic ends. Anissa Jones did just that. But that's not it. Let's continue. Friday, August 10th, 2018, 4 for Friday, his first victim. He was one of the biggest celebrities on the planet, PR. He had created something the entire world was discussing. He was young and at the top of his game. If you think about it, and what happened in the next few years with girls and teens who looked remarkably similar, you see the pattern developing. They ran into each other at a party. The kind of party where PR was probably too old, but this B-plus list actress fit right in. We'll call her VS. VS knew exactly who PR was, and he promised her a role in his new movie if she wanted to hang out. So they did. He forced her into all kinds of degrading sex acts, and to make her want to do them, found a doctor who prescribed a whole bunch of pills for her to take. PR also got her very special medicine from a friend in the Amazon who he had met while scouting a film that would make him even more famous. That special medicine is what ultimately would kill VS. They were supposed to meet one night, but PR had already found someone he liked more, and who was younger. He didn't want VS talking about him, so he told her to meet him late one night after she hung out with friends. He told her to take some of the special medicine an hour before they were to meet. She did, and ended up dead. A decade later, a family member of VS found out about PR and confronted PR about the death of VS. PR agreed to meet the family member. 2 hours after their meeting, the family member was dead. Alright, and the clues. PR, one of the biggest celebrities in the world, created something the world discussed. There were patterns that happened with similar looking girls over the years that followed. VS, B-list actress, much younger, she liked to party. And one of her family members died about 10 years later.
In the mid-1970s, sex, drugs, and rock and roll were a strong influence on the American culture. 18-year-old Anissa got caught up in the scene. Her experimentation with drugs intensified when she and her brother, Paul, both still in high school, rented their own apartment in the spring of 1976.
She had all kinds of real bad people in and out of that place and partying, and it was just not a good thing for her.
After she failed to graduate high school that May, Anissa spent the summer partying, using the money from her trust fund. Anissa frequently visited the small coastal town of Oceanside, where she liked to hang out and get high with friends. Their wild times escalated one weekend late that summer. On the evening of Saturday, August 27th, 1976, Anissa and Alan planned to meet a small group of people at friend Helen Hennessy's house in Oceanside. Before leaving for Helen's house, they took Quaaludes, smoked angel dust, and snorted cocaine.
And when we got to the house, we snorted the rest of the coke, and everybody was kind of ampy, on the coke. And the suggestion came up that Anissa had some Reds, so let's take some Reds. Everybody took 5 Reds.
Moments after taking the Reds, otherwise known as downers, Anissa and Alan retired to the master bedroom.
At about 3 o'clock in the morning, Buffy got up and went into Helen Hennessy's bedroom and tried to talk to her, and after a few minutes staggered back to her bedroom, and that was the last anybody saw of her alive.
The next morning, Alan got out of bed without noticing anything wrong with Anissa. He went to breakfast with a friend.
When we came back about an hour later, the girl, Helen, and Carla and Belinda were out front, and they went up to the bedroom, I guess. Well, they were out front, they just started screaming like, she's dead, she's dead. I was like, what? And I ran upstairs, and, I knew when I looked at her that she'd pass out. So, we dressed her, basically. We put some clothes on her, and we called the paramedics immediately.
Paramedics tried to revive Anissa, but it was too late. She was declared dead on the afternoon of August 28th. She was only 18. Family and friends were devastated. Detective Wagner had to break the tragic news to Anissa's mother, Paula.
She was in a state of shock. It was hard for her to accept it. Especially, it was hard for her to accept the fact that she had died of a drug overdose because, according to Paula, she was not aware of any drug use.
Paula requested that Anissa be cremated. There was no funeral. Anissa's ashes were scattered over the ocean near her home in Playa del Rey. Anissa's death was ruled an accident, but the exorbitant amount of drugs in her system prompted some to question Anissa's state of mind before she died.
PR, one of the biggest celebrities in the world, Steven Spielberg. PR, Private Ryan, created something the world discussed. Now, if this was before her death, it would have probably been Jaws. If it was after, then it was probably Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Patterns of similar looking girls over the years that followed. This is definitely something I noticed during Anissa Jones's E! True Hollywood Story, Shirley Temple.
Anissa Jones, to me, was one of the first ones that I saw as another budding Shirley Temple. Shirley Temple, no one could touch. And I think Anissa had all the earmarks, personality, everything.
Anissa Jones, Drew Barrymore, Heather O'Rourke, all three of those had a similar look. Two died young. One was an alcoholic at 9 years old. I wonder why.
So you started drinking at 9?
Oprah.
To prove a point, or to feel good, or to get drunk, or what?
Well, I didn't really know. I mean, when I was 8, I had had 2 glasses of champagne. And boom, I was like tipsy and, you know, bubbly and the life of the party. And I felt so good. All my problem had seemed, you know, to disappear for that hour that I was out of it. And I didn't realize that until I was 9 and I started casually drinking and realized,
Where would you get alcohol from at 9?
Oh, parties, friends, bars, clubs.
What were you doing at bars at 9?
A lot of the time it was for parties that I was invited to. A lot of the time I would walk up and they would be like, oh, it's little Drew Barrymore. Come right in, good publicity, you know.
And where were you when she was going to parties and bars at 9?
I was never with her at bars at 9, but I would go with her to parties. There were a lot of industry functions and then private social/business functions. And when we got there, we would stay together for time. Then she would go her way and I would go my way. And not knowing about the problem, I was not as scrutinizing as I should have been.
VS, B-list actress who was much younger and liked to party. VS, Vampire Slayer, because that's how I know the name Buffy. I wasn't old enough to watch Family Affair. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Family member died about 10 years later. 8 years after Anissa died, her brother died, 1984, from an overdose.
1984, 8 years after Anissa's passing, Paula Jones lost her only other child, Paul, also to a tragic overdose. He was 24. Today, Paula lives in the same beach house in Playa del Rey where she raised her children. She declined to be interviewed for this program.
Fucking stoned.
I got